Converted Man here. Andrew Knight appeared on my channel, not in person, but in video format, and I talked about his video. It only took me 5 days to cover it. No, actually, it was like about an hour or something. And then I followed that up with an open letter to him. And he took both really well, actually. And so that's always good. And he notified me that his new video was up. He told me he was going to make this, and I'm like, okay, all right, I'll see what you have here. And he 8 impossible questions for Christians to answer. Now, first and foremost, I want to offer praise to Andrew Knight. This video is way better than the atheist one. Milesly better, higher up. Like if I gave grades in the American system, we have A, B, C, D, and then F. There's no E because I don't know. And I would have given the last one an F. This one gets, I'd say, C minus. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. But it's not, it's like it could use a little bit more buffering. But then again, so could my videos. Certainly could use some more polish and buffering. Not buffering in terms of, the video is buffering, but, polish, but that's okay. I'm like, I don't like that he looks around at a fake audience still, but he's doing less of it now, so it's a little less annoying. Maybe it's just his style that he's used to. I don't know. I think he shouldn't do it. I think that he's better just talking to the camera or slightly off of the camera. But, whatever. It's his style. That's his choice. Okay. It's minor quibble. Tiny, insignificant quibble. What matters is the content of his presentation and or arguments. So, like I said, great deal of praise towards him for improving as much as he did between that video that I looked at and this video. And it seems maybe he took the constructive criticism that I offered and others offered to heart. And I think he did. I think that that's a great thing. And we all did maybe assume that he was Christian. And well, we shouldn't assume, but it's very easy to get into that mindset to think that all the apologists out there are Christian, and that's just not the case. So we never know what they mean by God. We have to ask them. We don't want to assume. I get that happening with me in my atheism a lot, in my skepticism a lot. People assume all sorts of things about me and my beliefs, and I don't like it. So apologies to Andrew if I did that. And then apologies on behalf of others who might have done that as well. Although I guess I could say you didn't clarify what God you believed in, so it's your fault, but, which that does apology. So then I have to apologize for that. But in all seriousness, the video with the atheist had arguments that he had perhaps encountered in his life. But these are not arguments that I recognize as being actual arguments. So I identified them as straw man arguments. And he didn't make it crystal clear that these were arguments that he had personally encountered. Like maybe he kind of said that, but also I just doubted that. But giving him more benefit of the doubt, it's quite possible that the arguments he attempted to cover last time were arguments he was familiar with. They were really bad arguments. And it seemed like maybe the video was more of a response to the people who gave him those arguments in the first place than they were to the general audience that he'd be encountering on YouTube, where he should have maybe looked at actual atheist arguments and gone after those instead. So, anyways, he doesn't do that here. And this approach, I think, is much better, to simply ask questions. That's much better, because then you understand your opponent, or your likely opponent. You understand their position and their ideas by asking questions. And so that's a far better approach in general. I would caution again about the naming of the video. Clickbaity titles I don't care for personally, although I guess somebody could accuse me of doing that every now and again with my video titles. So, maybe I shouldn't complain about it. But setting that aside, this isn't really how to defeat anybody. Asking any question to anybody about anything isn't an effort to defeat their idea per se. It's an effort to understand them better. That's the goal, hopefully, of a question. Unless it's a loaded question. And then the goal is indeed to knock them down verbally, to trap them. And so, yes, questions that can't be answered then should be avoided, because anybody can construct a loaded question. And that's a bad thing. We don't want to do that. It's unfair to them. It's unfair for us. It's not logical. And so what? How many angels can dance on the head of a pin? Nobody can answer that. It's an incoherent question. Well, for many reasons, but nonetheless, what is God made out of? Nobody can answer that question. There isn't really, there is answers you can give, but there's no real, well, it's a whole nother thing. But there's lots of questions we can't answer, and that doesn't matter. The questions are to understand their position better. So I'm not sure how you would title that as a video. Maybe just questions for Christians to consider. Having said that, he does seem to frame some of these questions in ways that could be seen as loaded. So I would suspect that an apologist that's a Christian who responds to his video might object, rightfully so, to these sort of loaded questions that seem to be asked, and they might not give him as much leeway as I'm willing to give him, and not, not steel man him or give him benefit of the doubt sort of thing. And just say that's a straw man, I'm not going to, or that's a loaded question, I'm not going to answer that, or whatever. But these are, I think, for the most part, I think all the questions are decent questions. I think they're pretty good questions. And the answer to all the questions, I went through them, and I gave the answers that I think other people would give, or at least the answers that I am aware of to give. Because for the most part, all his questions can be answered with, it depends who you ask, because you will get a wide variety of answers to these questions, and that in and of itself is an interesting phenomenon worth documentation and study. Let's document those different answers that we get from different people, and see if we can get anything that even resembles a straightforward belief system that we can say this applies to all, because I don't think we will. I don't even, the Catholics seem to think that they all are on the same page. I don't think that they are, but they certainly seem to think that. I got Catholics on my mind because my last video irritated Catholics, and that makes me very happy. Anyways, so I think that most of these questions are rather well. All of them, it depends who you ask. yeah, pretty much I said, depends who you ask for all of them. But he's got what does prayer, what is prayer for? What does it mean to pray for something to happen? How does that work mechanically speaking? What's the functionality of prayer? And well, some believe that it's for worship and it's not to pray to ask for things, even though you are told to ask for things in the Bible. It's very contradictive. It's like in one moment it's saying, if you have two are gathered in my name, whatever you ask will be granted to you. But that doesn't mean what you think it means. It actually means something else. Like, God's not a genie that you can just wish for things and it will happen. Whatever God answers is within God's desire to answer. So if you ask for help in finding your keys, God might indeed help you to find your keys. Actually, we did do a talk, didn't we? Wasn't that the thing that wasn't somebody said that? Wait, was that you? Oh, wait. Um, no, that's somebody. Well, whatever. Anyways, but that that doesn't mean that God answered that. It just means you found your keys, and coincidentally, you also were asking to find your keys. But God never responds to a prayer that is outside the boundaries of the natural world, as far as I've ever seen I've heard stories. People have claimed things, but nothing that's demonstrably demonstrable. So you would have at least two possible answers for that one. And let's see. Who? No, wait. Didn't I talk to? Ah, man. Now my brain's like wanting to know if I did or didn't. Whatever. I'll check later. Maybe I did, and I just don't. My I and or I, So okay, so that was his first question. Um, and then how do you know that faith is useful I would have said, is faith a good way to determine what is true or not? Because people like to try to make faith into being about trust. Well, does that ensure you that the thing that you're trusting is true or not? Like if you say, well, I have faith when I sit down that my share is going to support my weight. Okay, great. But is that a good way to know if something is true or not? Because the share might not support your weight. So, is faith a good system for getting to the truth? And is there a better system for getting to the truth? Might be, there's different ways to frame uh, the questions. So, that's another one he asks. He says, how do you know that faith brought you to the correct religion? But he puts it as kind of like a faith doesn't work, you know. Um, yeah. So then he asks questions more specific to Christians. Did Jesus' blood atone for the sins of those who don't believe in him? No, is the answer to that one. Thanks for playing. But also, it depends who you ask. And so some would say yes, but kind of. Well, it depends. Because God's love is very conditional. Yahweh's love is extraordinarily conditional. If you don't believe the right thing, you're screwed. End of story, the end. Oh well. So no, it doesn't count. But it's for everybody. Well, it's for everybody with an asterisk. It's for everybody that believes in it. Well, what about people who don't believe it? Well, they're screwed. And if they hear about Jesus and they don't believe, they are screwed, and that's it. And you go, well, that doesn't seem fair. It doesn't matter if it seems fair. That's your human judgment. You're not God. You don't know. So, it's too bad. And the Calvinists, of course, would just say we're all predestined one way or the other, so it just doesn't matter. Yeah. But that's a good question to ask, is how, what is the mechanism of Jesus's death in regards to those who do not believe? How does that work? Again, a very interesting question to find out more about, but everybody's going to have a different answer. So this isn't like a game stopper or anything like that. He asks my favorite question: why did God create skeptics? And yeah, it would depend on who you ask. Free will. He didn't actually create the skeptics. He created people that might be skeptics. So pick Jesus or get screwed. Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is a pick Jesus or get screwed. Yeah, exactly. The Judeo-Christian system is extraordinarily it's all about, you have to accept this or else. That's it. It doesn't make any coherent sense when you actually analyze it, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I suspect very few religions make sense, or any beliefs about God really make sense when you analyze them in that way. But or they make sense in certain, in terms of emotion, but not in terms of reason, if you will. But yeah, why did God create skeptics? Good question. Very good question to ask. The way he kind of digs deeper into the question, though, this is where my caution of him potentially loading the questions comes into play, because he asks this in such a way that you can't answer the question. The question just should have been asked and left alone. Why did God create the ability to be skeptical against God? Like, it's one thing to create free will and let me choose to believe or not, if you will, but then again, that doesn't, the whole choice thing, that's illusionary, because there isn't really a choice. It's a choice of believing in something that I have no evidence for, which I just can't do. So why would God make it that my brain is that way? And well, because God has reasons to do it, appeal to the mystery of God. There isn't really an answer for it. But leaving the question alone, as stated, allows the person to try to explain themselves, rather than add in additional questions that might load the question, which is kind of what he's doing here, when he goes on deeper about what he's actually asking. So I strongly suspect that if and when any religious apologist responds to this video, that they will say that this is a loaded question in full. They won't give him the possible benefit that I am. And I'm probably only doing that because I like when Christians get pwned. Maybe. Or maybe it's because I'm so darn impressed that he improved this much from last time. Now, by the way, if he'd asked questions to atheists like this in his last video, I would have answered whatever those questions were, and I would have had different complaints. Yeah, I'm still going to complain. I'm not going to not complain. If a religion made sense, one would think there'd be only one that is flocked to by unbelievers. Yeah, I would tend to think so. Well, if there was, we could get into that later, but yes. So okay, and then he asks, what is hell? Very good question. I don't know. It depends who you ask. Good question though. It's a very decent question to ask. How does it work? Is it hellfire? Is it brimstone? Is it a separation of God? Which is weird, because also God, it says in the Bible that God is everywhere. So how can you be separate from God? And so some people say, well, then hell must be non-existence, because you can't. God is everywhere. So the only way to be separate from God is to not exist. And others will say that there isn't a hell, and some will say there's a purgatory as well. And goodness knows, you'll get all sorts of answers for this question, but very good question. And he follows it up with the flip side of that question, which is, what is heaven? Also a good question. How does that work? What is it like? Is it a place of eternal worship? That sounds boring, but that's how it's described in Revelation. There's only a few glimpses of heaven throughout the Bible. In fact, there's only a few glimpses at what people call hell throughout the Bible. But both of these things have come not from the Bible, but from theology that is layered on top. Beliefs about what the words are saying that have come from various different people that have written and spoken on the matter, and it's been kind of codified, and the zeitgeist keeps it going. So the meta faith of people in regards to hell and heaven is really not based on scripture at all. It's based on church tradition mostly. I would say, broadly speaking, at any rate. But a good question to ask. It's not going to stump anybody, but per se, but it's a decent question. And then, is the Bible a source of morality? Damn good question, man. That's a good question. I'm going to steal that question. What really can you point to and say that that's, because people love to, without God, there's no morals. And it's like, really? So 10 commandments, right? 3 of them at least I toss out. I see no value in them. That's the first 3. What's the value of not blaspheming God, etc., etc.? None of that matters to my fellow humans. So I'm worried about my humans because I don't know about God. So when I'm dealing with morals and ethics, I'm only going to be dealing with humans, really. Well, maybe animals as well, but definitely humans for sure. So that's really my primary focus. So definitely the 10 commandments, and most of them you could toss out, and then the rest you could reword, you could work it down to basically one, which is don't be an asshole. I mean, really, it's like, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't be, and then it's like and then of course they're like, well, it's all codified down to one simple thing with love your neighbor as yourself. Oh, wow, that's so amazing. But what does that mean? How does that work? So they're really, you really have to grapple with that as a theologian that is doing apologetics for Christianity or Judeo-Christianity or Judaism or Islam. It's like, show me where you're getting, what morals you're extrapolating, what Bible verses are supporting that notion, and why is it okay to ignore some commandments but not others, and because there's 613 commandments, laws in the Bible. I've read them all. They suck. I think there was like maybe 1 or 2 that I was like okay with, but still not, because they all end in death pretty much if you don't obey them, which I think is vile and reprehensible. Stoning people to death is messed up. So your God's okay with that and ordered that, really? And this is where you're going to get your morals from? Is a deity that wanted people stoned to death? I don't see that as ethical or moral. There's much. I don't see death as a penalty being very moral or ethical either. Anyways, whatever. But yeah, is the Bible a source of morality? Or really a source of morality? Is decent. Maybe we could rephrase it a bit, but I think pretty good. Where do you get, where in the Bible do you find these morals? Might be a different way to say that. There might be even better phrasing that I can't think of. And he points out some verses that he thinks are of issue. But I'll leave that to the apologist to deal with. And then he asks, is it possible that you're wrong? Which is always a great question to ask. In fact, probably, one of the most important. In fact, I'd say that should be the first one. Are you willing to discover that you are incorrect about your ideas? If not, then forget it. We're gonna waste our time. Well, caveat there, but are you willing to be wrong? Are you willing to find out that you're incorrect? And with that long talk that I had um, a while back, this guy showed up and he said, that the sign of Jonah is upon us, and that the eclipse that's coming is, it's crossing over all these cities that have biblical names, and they make a cross, and then where they cross, there's a cross under that cross, and all these insane claims, and then 40 days after that day, when all this happens, that all hell will break loose. And I'm like, okay, so when nothing happens, he's like, well, I didn't say anything would happen. You did. I'm like, all right, you're done. Because he just had said all hell will break loose. So you can't have it both ways. All hell's going to break loose, but also nothing's really going to happen. Which is it, And that's what I was trying to get at. But yeah, the sort of, apocalyptic, things, end times people that always come up with this stuff. Um, just immediately and instantly fall apart when you ask critical questions, right? Don't make DM read 613 again. Yeah, I really don't want to. It was a chore and slog going through it once, and I did it so nobody else has to do it. I'm sure somebody else has a much, what's his face that I can't think of now. James has a much better voice. Make him read it. Yeah, different levels of hell in heaven. Yeah, that was Dante's Inferno. Really is the zeitgeist for the origin of a lot of hell, I think. Because his painting of it, and or I think somebody painted based on his poem. I don't know that he painted that painting, but regardless, Dante's Inferno story / poem / epic, whatever you want to call it, about hell and its layers and levels and whatnot. And then somebody did a painting on that, and Dante's Inferno, and I think that got into the zeitgeist, and that's where a lot of ideas of hell come from, besides the church itself. But yeah, I kind of ran off course of what I was saying here in regards to what Andrew said. Oh, it's impossible you're wrong, right? So that might be the first question you might want to ask. Remember the Bill Nye versus Ham debate? Somebody asked that question, and Bill Nye's like, or no, they didn't ask that question. They asked, no, they did. They said, what could show if you're wrong, or how do you know if you're, what, and Bill Nye was like, if we have evidence, that's it, and then the other guy was like, well, I'm a Christian, I'm not wrong. It's like, yeah, there you go. So yeah, if you're dealing with somebody that isn't willing to consider that they could be wrong at all, then you're not going to go anywhere with that person in convincing them. But if you have an audience listening to that conversation, there's a potential benefit at any rate, for others who listen to that conversation to be convinced. And yes, you risk that they're convinced in a way that you don't want them to be, but I think that the truth must be spoken regardless of the risk of people believing in the untruth, and that the value of debate and discussion is that the ideas compete, and hopefully, ideally, the correct one wins. It's not always the case, but you have to fight the good fight
regardless of the consequences. Because if you don't, then you're silent, and that certainly doesn't end well. Yeah, anyways, praise to Andrew Knight. Thumb up this video as if not my video. Well, if you want to thumb up my video, that's fine. But definitely thumb up Andrew's video. Check it out yourself. Comment yourself on his video if you feel so inclined to do. Let him know what you think of it as well. And because hey, look, if I can bury the guy under logic and reason, then I can also raise him from the dead because he's using good or better logic and reason than he did before. And we can criticize, but we can also commend. And hopefully he will come and talk to me if he hasn't already and I just forgot because my brain's broken. That could be, it's always possible. I don't know anymore. I checked and rechecked my channel. It doesn't look like I've talked to him, but let me know if I did and I just forgot. Let me know in the comments because I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Wait, I never knew what I was doing in the first place. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Whee! Oh, by the way, I'm going to delete the Quantum Leap video. Or not going to delete it, but I'm going to put it on headed mode because I don't want it on my channel except on the 29th. I'm going to leave it up there for one more day. It's going to be up there for one more day, and then it's going to go away. So get it now if you want it. Hey, and if you're too late, then it doesn't matter. Finn.